So, good morning. My name is Torebio, and I am a third year Bachelor of Science in Agriculture student of Mindanao State University. So, in this presentation, I am going to relay what I understand about the concept of economics. So for the first topic, capitalism. What is capitalism? So an economic system in which private actors own and control property in accord with their interest and demand and supply freely set prices in markets in a way that can serve the best interests of the society. So capitalism from the world itself, it involves capital or money, which in turn it is an investment wherein we can gain a profit. So the essential feature of capitalism is the motive to make a profit. It is the rational self-interest that can lead to economic prosperity. So economic prosperity yung ng yung paglago ng ekonomiya. So there are pillars of capitalism. So the first one is private property allow people to own tangible and intangible asset. So sa private property, dito po yung mga may-ari ay pwedeng may-ari ng tangible at intangible asset. Para po nating maintindihan, akin pong ilalawak ang pag-explain kung ano nga ba ang tangible asset at ang intangible asset. So, tangible asset. Sa tangible asset, an asset that has a finite monetary values and usually in physical form. So, ito yung mga asset na nahahawakan, katulad ng equipments, buildings, cash, at yung land. Yun ang mga example ng tangible asset in which ito ay nahahawakan. Sa kabilang dako naman, ang intangible asset, ito yung mga non-physical, no physical present. So, for example, computer softwares, trademarks, patents, copyright. Yun ay mga hindi nahahawakan na asset. At i-include dito yung sales stock. Asset ang sales stock pero hindi siya nahahawakan. So, the second pillar is competition firms' freedom to enter and exit markets, maximize social welfare. So, sa competition firms, ito ay nakakatulong para ma-maximize ang social welfare. So, ito ay nakakadagdag, nakaka-maximize. So, market mechanism determines prices in a decentralized manner through interaction between buyers and sellers. So, sa market mechanism, dito yung nag-i-interact ang buyer at ang seller. So, the next one is self-interest. People act in pursuit of their own good. So, sa self-interest, from the word itself, from the word self, so parang ito ay pagiging makasarili. Pagiging makasarili na it is nakakadulot ng own good sa isang business o kumpanya. So, the next one is freedom. The next pillar is freedom. Choose with respect to consumption, production, and investment. So, dito na yung mai-involve ang consumption, ang production at ang tsaka ang mga pag-i-invest. Yung mag-i-invest ka upang mapalago ang isang negosyo. So the next pillar is limited role of government protect the right of private citizen and maintain an orderly environment that facilitates proper functioning of market. So dito yung gumagawa ng batas ang gobyerno upang maprotektahan ang right of a private citizen to maintain orderly environment. So, orderly environment yung ethical yung environment ng isang business. So, dito na yung mapapasok yung mga code of ethics ng isang kumpanya na dapat nating sundin upang we cannot reach in a hostile environment yung nakakasira sa isang kumpanya. So, so the next topic is mixed economies. Blend of markets and government. Markets plays a dominant role but are regulated to a greater extent by government to correct market failures such as pollution and trade congestion, promote social welfare, and for other reasons such as defense and public safety. Mixed capitalist economies predominate. So from the word itself, mix. So blend of markets. So ito yung pag-mix ng mga sa market. So the next topic is the shades of capitalism. So capitalism can be simply sliced into two types based on how production is organized. It depends on how the production is organized. So, the first one is liberal market. Liberal market economies. The competitive market is prevalent and the bulk of the production process takes place in a decentralized manner to the free market capitalism that can be seen in the United States and the United Kingdom. So, for further explanation, liberal market, it is one of the main varieties of capitalism identified by Peter A. Hall and David Sosky. The prime example of a liberal market economy is in the United States of America, but the label is also applied to the form of capitalism in Australia, Britain, Canada, Ireland, and New Zealand. So itong mga lugar na to, sila ay gumagamit ng liberal market economies. So the next shade of capitalism is coordinated market economies. On the other hand, exchange private information through non-market institutions such as unions and business associations, as in Germany and Japan. So, exchange of private information through non-market. Ito ay yung coordinated market economies, yung pag-exchange ng information through non-market institutions such as unions and business association. So parang dito na bibilang yung mga ASEAN, yung international trading and all. So the next one is state-guided capitalism. The government decides which sector will grow. Initially motivated by a desire to foster growth, this type of capitalism has several pitfalls: excessive investment, picking the wrong winners, susceptibility to corruption, and difficulty withdrawing support when it is no longer appropriate. So that is the state-guided capitalism. The next one is oligarchic capitalism, oriented toward protecting and enriching a very narrow fraction of the population. Economic growth is not a central objective in countries which variety has great. So economic growth is not a central objective, and countries with this variety have a great deal of inequality and corruption. So, ang oligarchic capitalism, this kind of capitalism, it is oriented toward protecting, enriching a very narrow fraction of the population. So, meron lang po siyang scope. So, naprotektahan na scope lang po ng population. So, hindi siya yung kabuuan talaga. So, the next type of capitalism is big firm capitalism. So, takes advantage of economic of scale. This type is important for mass production of product. So, importante to sa mass production. So, yung from the word mass, so marami, mass production. Entrepreneurial capitalism produces breakthrough like the automobile, telephone, and computer. These innovations are usually the product of individuals and new firms. However, it takes big firms to mass produce and market new products to mix of big firm and entrepreneurial capitalism seems best. So from the word itself, big firm, so malalaking mga businesses na po. So the next topic is micro and macroeconomics, the economic divide. So ang una-una pong naintindihan ko from the word macro itself, it is involvement a large yung malaki. When in the other hand, micro means small. So ito ay parang a portion lang, hindi yung kabuuan. For example, yung macro is siya ay nauugnay sa kabuuan ng isang ekonomiya, which in sa micro yung hindi as a whole. So, macroeconomics, concern in how the overall economy works. So, ito yung sinasabi ko na ang kabuuan, overall economy, concern siya sa overall economy works. It studies such things as employment. So, employment is yung pagbibigay ng trabaho, gross domestic product, yung GDP, and inflation. Inflation, yung ang inflation yung pagbago ng mga price na, for example, yung mga gas, inflation. The top of news stories and government policy debate, the subject typically a nation how all market interact to generate big phenomena that economists call aggregate varieties. The government is a major object of analysis in macroeconomics. Macroeconomics often extend to the international sphere because domestic markets are linked to foreign markets through trade, investment, and capital flow. So, pag yung una is micro, so ang susunod is microeconomic, concerned with how supply and demand interact in individual market for goods and services. The object of analysis is a single market. Microeconomics can have international components. Well, single market often are not confined to single countries. The global market for petroleum is an obvious example. So, sa microeconomics, it is not concerned sa overall economy work where nag-ano lang siya ng site. For example, a single market. Sorry. Excuse. So, why the divide? There was no separation into microeconomics and macroeconomics. Economists implicitly assume that either markets were equilibrium such that prices would adjust to equalize supply and demand, or that in the event of an transient shock, such as financial crisis or a famine. So, financial crisis, financial yung mga krisis. Tapos yung famine, pagkagutom. Or kulang na ang supply ng mga pagkain that can lead into famine. Market would quickly return to equilibrium. In other words, economists believe that the study of individual market would adequately explain the behavior of what we know call aggregate varieties such as unemployment and output. Unemployment, yung mga taong wala pang trabaho. It was not that economists were unaware that aggregate varieties could be unstable. They studied business cycles as economies regularly change from a condition of a rising output and employment to reduce or falling growth and rising unemployment, frequently punctuated by severe changes or economic crisis. Economists also studied money and its role in the economy. Its main concern is the stability of aggregate variables, whereas early economists concentrated or equilibrium in individual market. Keynes introduced the simultaneous consideration of equilibrium in three interested sets of market: for goods, labor, and for finance. His approach was taken up by other leading economists and developed rapidly into what is now known as macroeconomics. So, next topic is economic models, simulation of reality. So, the modern economy. It is complex machine. Its job is to allocate limited resource and distribute the resulting output among a large number of agents, mainly individuals, firms, and governments, allowing for the possibility that each agent's action can directly or indirectly affect other agents' action. As economists allocate goods and services, they emit measurable signals that suggest there is order driving the complexity. There is also seems to be a negative relationship between inflation and the rate of unemployment in the short term. At the other extreme, equity prices seems to be stubbornly unpredictable. So, a useful model. The standard model of supply and demand thought in introductory economies is a good example of a useful economic model. So, di ba nung mga previous na mga video na napanood natin, um, doon natin nakikita ano nga ba ang relationship between the supply and demand. So, sa supply, um, kung mataas yung supply, so maraming supply. So, in term, mura ang price ng isang produkto. For example, it is seasonal ng season ng pag-harvest ng mais. So, kung maraming supply, dito naapektuhan ang price. Kumbaga, ito ay mabibili ng mura. So, sa demand naman, kung konti lang ang demand, so it means that mas higher ang price ng isang produkto. Kasi, konti lang. Its basic purpose is to explain the analyze prices and quantities traded in a competitive market. So, pag dito, sa supply and demand, dito natin maiintindihan kung bakit tumataas o bumababa yung mga um, price ng mga produkto. Dahil naapektuhan ito sa yung season of harvest, ganyan, sa mga paningit, for example, unspecific land, yung tinataniman naka-experience ng flood. So meaning, maliit lang nila yung harvest nila, kaya pinapataas yung presyo ng isang produkto. So, the market clearing price is determined by the requirements that supply equal demand at the price. Demand is usually set to decline and supply to increase with price, yielding a system that moves toward the market clearing price that is equilibrium without intervention. So, what makes a good economic model? So, in respective of the approach, the scientific methods, lots of sciences such as physics and meteorology creates model. Requires that every model yield precise and verifiable implication about the economic phenomena it is trying to explain. Formal evaluation involves testing the model's key implication and assessing its ability to reproduce stylized facts. Economists used many tools to test their models, including case studies, lab-based experimental studies, and statistics. Systematic errors imply that one or more equation of the model are incorrect. So, ito yung for example, a good economic model. So, kung mag-i-introduce ka ng model, kailangan po ng scientific study in which kung ito ba ay magiging effective. So, dito na yung may involve yung research. Kailangan po ng research upang malaman po kung ito po ay makakatulong po ba o hindi. So, supply and demand. Why market fix? So, perfect competition. The most fundamental is perfect competition in which there are large numbers of identical supplier and demanders of the same product. Buyers and sellers can find one another at no cost, and no buyers prevent new suppliers from entering the market. Perfect competition, no one has the ability to affect prices. So sa perfect combination, hindi walang nakaka-apekto sa mga prices. Both sides takes the market price as a given, and the market clearing price is one at which there is neither excess supply for excessive demand. Suppliers will keep producing as long as they can sell the good for a price that exceeds their cost of making one more. So, ang mga suppliers ay keep on producing, pero dito dapat ang price that exceeds their cost of making one more, marginal cost of production. So, parang hindi nalulugi. Buyers will go on purchasing as long as the satisfaction they derive from consuming is greater than the price they pay. The marginal utility of consumption. If prices rise, additional suppliers will be enticed to enter the market. So, supply will increase. So, ang supply, matataas yung supply until a market clearing price is reached again. If prices fail, suppliers who are unable to cover their costs will drop out. So kung hindi na nila kaya yung unable to cover their costs, mag-drop out na yung supplier. Prices can change for many reasons. So, maraming rason kung bakit nag-change yung price. Sa technology, consumer preference, weather conditions. So sa weather condition, ito yung sinasabi ko. Yung, for example, may mga kalamidad. So ang devastating man ang kalamidad. So, for example, maapektuhan yung ang harvest. For example, kung walang kalamidad, makaka-harvest sa isang hectare ng palayan ng 50 sacks. So kung dadating yung mga baha, yung mga kalamidad, so masisira ang mga pananim, which is konti na lang yung production ng rice, which in turn tataas yung presyo ng palay o bigas. The relationship between the supply and demand for a good or service in exchange in price is called elasticity. Goods that are inelastic are relatively insensitive to change in price, whereas elastic goods are very responsive to price. So yung elastic goods very kasi sila responsive to price. Of course, most markets are imperfect. They are not composed of unlimited buyers and sellers of virtually identical items who have perfect knowledge. At the other end of the spectrum from perfect competition is monopoly. So, monopoly. There is one supplier of a good for which there is no simple substitute. The supplier does not take the market price as a given. Instead, the monopolist can see it. Monopolist twin is monopsony, in which there is only one buyer, usually government, although they are may be many suppliers. So from the words mono, it involves only one. So barriers to competition and monopoly. In monopoly situation, there is usually a barrier, natural or legal, to potential competitors. So, it is normal pag in business, marami talagang competition. So, competitors, government usually regulate such monopolies to ensure that they do not abuse their market power. So, siguradong hindi ma-abuse dito ang market power by setting prices too high. So, 'di ba, meron tayong sinasabing suggested retail price. So, pwedeng makasuhan ng ang isang may-ari ng isang, for example, tindahan kung mag-i-exceed siya sa suggested retail price, kaya may batas na kailangan sundin para hindi makakasuhan at hindi rin hindi sila makakapag tataas ng presyo kasi hindi po yun makatarungan. This generally allow companies to recover fixed costs. Monopolies can be obvious to demand, which as under perfect competition varies depending on price. The difference is that the producer in perfect competition fulfills only a portion of total demand, whereas the monopolists benefit from the demand curve of the entire market. So the unregulated monopolies can decide to produce a quantity that maximizes its profit, almost always at a higher price, and a smaller amount that can be perfectly competitive. Market in perfect competition, a firm with lower costs can reduce its price and add enough customers to make up for lost revenue and existing sales. So the next topic is gross domestic product and economy all or GDP. So what is GDP? Gross domestic product measures the monetary value of an final good and service, that is, those that are bought by the final users, produced in a country in a given period of time, say a quarter or a year. It counts all the output generated within the borders of a country. GDP is composed of goods and services produced for sale in the market and also includes some non-market production such as defense or education services provided by the government. So dito sa GDP, involved na dito yung mga international trading, yung pag-export and export. So, GDP in three different ways. The production approach sums the value added at each stage of production, where value added is defined as total sales minus the value of intermediate inputs into the production process. The expenditure approach adds up the value of purchase made by the final user. For example, the consumption of food, television, and medical services by household, the investment in machinery by companies, and the purchase of goods and services by the government and foreigners. The next one, the income approach, sums the income generated by production. For example, the compensation paid to employees, rent paid to land, interest paid of capital, and profit paid to the company owners. One thing people want to know about an economy is whether its total output of goods and services is growing or shrinking. Gross domestic product is important because it gives information about the size of the economy and how an economy is performing. The growth rate of real gross domestic product is often used as an indicator of the general health of an economy. In broad terms, an increase of real gross domestic product is interpreted as a sign that the economy is doing well. So, kung nag-increase of gross domestic product, so It means as this is a sign of yung progressive yung ekonomiya ng isang bansa. GDP is a measure of overall standard of living or well-being of a country. So the next topic is monetarism. Money is where it's at. Monetarism. The money supply, the total amount of money in an economy, is the chief determinant of current dollar or current dollar gross domestic product. In the short run and of the price level over longer periods, monetary policy, one of the tools government have to affect the overall performance of the economy. Used as instruments such as interest rates to adjust the amount of money in the economy. Monetarists believe that objective of monetary policy are the best met by targeting the growth rate of the money supply market inherently stable in the absence of major unexpected fluctuation in the money supply. They also assert that government intervention can often destabilize the economy more than help it. Monetarists also believe that there is no long-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment because the economy settles at long-run equilibrium at a full employment level of output. Probably the most important is that inflation cannot continue indefinitely without increases in the money supply. Controlling it should be primary, if not the only responsibility of the central bank. So that would be the end of my presentation. Thank you for watching, and I hope you understand something in my presentation. Thank you very much, and God bless us all.